Exposed, the incredible and surprising truth about what 100 Ottoman women endured beyond death. Sarah Johnson felt the familiar ache in her chest as she entered the classroom. Budget cuts loomed like storm clouds over her small school in Harmony Pines, threatening everything she cherished. As a history teacher, she was driven by a fire deep within her, a passion for illuminating the past. But that passion seemed futile against the indifference of administrators focused solely on numbers. Would her dreams of fostering a love for history among her students slip away, suffocated by institutional apathy? The weight of their future crammed into spreadsheets tightening around her heart. As the rain drummed incessantly against the windows that afternoon, Sarah sat on the edge of her grandmother's dusty attic, rummaging through boxes filled with shadows of the past. Beneath a dusty quilt, she discovered an ornate diary, belonging to her grandmother's best friend, a remarkable woman who had crossed oceans and cultures to escape the Ottoman Empire. Each page, an echo of the struggles and triumphs of 100 Ottoman women, whispered to Sarah, unveiling tales of courage and resilience in the face of societal oppression. With every letter she translated, Sarah was drawn into a world that felt both foreign and compellingly familiar. These women's struggles mirrored her own unease, their battles for dignity resonating deeply with her fight against the constraints of an unsupportive educational system. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The emotional strain intensified when she approached Principal Carter about showcasing these women's lives at the town library. "This isn't relevant to our curriculum, Sarah," he said dismissively, stacking papers on his desk, oblivious to the life lessons buried within the stories of resilience. Dismissive words echoed in her mind like daggers. Did the ghosts of those Ottoman women fight for recognition only to fall silent once again? Frustration turned to anguish as Sarah felt torn between loyalty to her grandmother's legacy and her duty to an institution locked in misunderstanding. The nail in the coffin struck when parents rallied behind Principal Carter, clamoring for a focus on STEM instead of humanities. Why should our kids learn about women from centuries ago when they could be learning coding instead? A father roared, his words striking Sarah like a thunderclap. She felt helplessly frozen, gripped by a tightening throat and racing mind, caught between the skeptical glances of the crowd and the urgent need to honor her ancestors. As she prepared to speak, the room thickened with tension. The air turned electric with doubt and curiosity. She was teetering on the brink. Would her voice reverberate beyond her own fears, reaching those who needed to hear the stories of the past? The moment stretched, heavy with the weight of decisions yet to be made, as the ghosts of those brave women urged Sarah to take that step into uncertainty. Would she find the strength to confront not just her audience, but also the fear that gripped her heart, pressing her deeper into the shadows of silence? The air crackled with tension in the auditorium as Sarah stood before the assembly, her heart thudding against her ribcage like a caged bird desperate for freedom. As Principal Carter's thick brows knitted in impatience, Sarah felt the weight of the skeptical gazes piercing her. This was not just an audience, this was her community, her colleagues, and most importantly, the students she loved. They needed to hear her, to understand the significance of the women's narrative she had come to cherish. Taking a calculated breath, she stepped forward, engaging her audience with a trembling but determined voice. We often think history is just a collection of facts, but it's so much more. It's the lives, the struggles of people who came before us, who fought to be heard. The words came out halting at first and then gathered momentum, fueled by the passion ignited within her. As she spoke, she painted a picture of the Ottoman women, their heartbreaks, their victories, and every quiet rebellion against a world that sought to silence them. She could see the shifts in her audience. Some were leaning forward, intrigue etched on their faces, while others remained locked in their skepticism. Each story she recounted lifted her from the brink of despair, feeding her spirit like kindling to a fire. But doubt crept back in as she glanced toward a collection of faces set in stone. Would they ever understand? The murmurs began, rolling through the room like storm clouds, whispering that these women, their voices, were irrelevant in the face of today's challenges. The instinct to retreat welled up within her, yet amidst the swell of fear, the diary's words echoed in her mind. They had endured battles far greater than this moment. How can we build a future if we don't understand our past? She implored, her voice a knot of urgency. These women transcended their suffering and shared knowledge that shaped generations. We owe it to them to listen to learn. It was in this moment of vulnerability that the past aligned with her present. The realization hit her with profound clarity. History was not just about the renowned wars or celebrated figures, it was about every individual story, the raw and unrefined truths that compelled hearts to change. With renewed fortitude, Sarah made a pledge to herself to embrace the courage of the women she admired, to weave their stories into the fabric of her teaching, and to challenge the framework set by a system blind to the beauty of humanity's timeless lessons. Just as a flicker of hope began to spark in the audience, a voice pierced through the room. "This is just emotional manipulation," one parent sneered, igniting a ripple of murmurs. "You, as an educator, should focus on what will actually benefit our children." With each jeering remark, Sarah felt her heart race. Anguish and determination collided within her as she prepared to confront this adversary. She realized this was not solely about sharing stories, it was about standing firm for the principles she believed in. The time had come to face the harsh realities that surrounded her, to challenge the complacency of those who dared to dismiss the importance of history. As she lifted her chin, ready to respond, the echoes of the Ottoman women flowed through her, readying her for a confrontation that would reshape her understanding of her role, and perhaps, her very identity. Would she be able to stand her ground against the looming backlash, or would the fear of backlash push her back into silence? The room breathed with anticipation. Everything hung delicately in the balance, as Sarah prepared to not just share her own voice, but to raise up those who had been silenced for far too long. The silence that enveloped the auditorium was heavy, punctuated only by the low hum of unease swirling in the atmosphere. Sarah stood her ground, feeling the heat of skepticism radiate from the rows of folded arms and furrowed brows. The time for hesitation had passed. She straightened her posture, channeling the strength of the Ottoman women she had come to admire. Emotional manipulation? I would argue that choosing apathy is far more damaging. To strip these women of their narratives is to erase a vital part of our humanity. The clarity of her convictions resonated, and for a fleeting moment, it felt as if a shift in the energy was possible. Principal Carter's eyes darkened, a clear signal that her words had crossed an invisible line. "Sarah," he interjected, voice dripping with authority, "this is not the platform for emotionally charged discussions. We need to focus on curriculum goals, not personal reflections." The tension twisted in her gut. Did they really believe history could be neatly packaged, stripped of emotion and complexity? But history is not merely facts on a page, she pressed, desperation creeping into her tone. It's a mirror reflecting our society, it shapes our understanding of ourselves and others. To dismiss their stories is to dismantle the very connections that can guide us in making a better future. She felt the weight of challenging his authority. His expression suggested he had no intention of yielding. Yet this confrontation was more than a battle of words. It was a critical moment in her evolution as an educator. With newfound realization, Sarah acknowledged the risk before her. Should she accept the stagnant status quo or fight for a narrative that demanded recognition? "Let us consider the teachings of resilience," she continued, her voice steadier now. "When we disengage from the past, we rob ourselves of the strength these women exemplified, strength that could teach our students to rise amidst their own challenges today." The audience momentarily fell silent, captivated. Sarah felt a spark ignite within her, fueled by the intensity of her commitment to these stories. She glanced around, searching for allies among the sea of doubters. A few head nods encouraged her, but she could also sense the looming disapproval of others, their faces a mixture of disbelief and disdain. Caught in this internal turmoil, Sarah realized this was not just a confrontation with her peers but a deeper reckoning with her teaching philosophy. Would she retreat to keep the peace, or would she confront the discomfort head-on? Each heartbeat felt like a drum signaling her next move. "I owe it to my students," she declared, her chest swelling with resolve. "To prepare them for a world that often tries to erase their voices. Teaching isn't merely about delivering information, it's about fostering empathy and critical thinking by understanding our shared histories." And as she spoke, she could see the glimmers of understanding flicker in some eyes, curiosity breaking through the skepticism. For the first time, she felt a connection, a bond forming with the few who had leaned in, desperate to listen, desperate to learn. But not everyone was swayed. A voice rang out once more, sharper this time. "You're not preparing them, you're confusing them." The challenge hung in the air, thick like smoke. Sarah inhaled slowly, prepared to respond, but a powerful wave of uncertainty washed over her. With each word thrown at her, the fractures in her confidence threatened to widen. In that moment, she made a decision to reclaim her narrative amid the chaos. The women she honored had faced far worse. She clenched her fists, rallying her inner strength. "If you cannot see the value in understanding pain, struggle, and resilience, then I fear for our children's ability to empathize and grow." The room quieted again, and Sarah felt the tension shift, the pendulum of opinion teetering at the precipice of her influence. Yet the battle was far from over. Would she be able to hold on to this momentum, or would the resistance crush her growing resolve? As the murmurs began to rise again, a question loomed in her mind: was she ready to face the true cost of her convictions and fight for the stories of the unheard? The answers lay just beyond the horizon, and they were calling her closer to the truth. With steely determination, she prepared for the impending storm. The air in the auditorium pulsed with tension as Sarah locked eyes with Principal Carter. It was a duel of wills, a contest between the poise of her convictions and the authority he so rigidly upheld. Deep within, doubts clawed at her, but a fierce resolve overshadowed the impending fear. This was no longer just a discussion about history, it was a testament to her identity as an educator. "Confusion is a part of understanding," she countered, her voice echoing with newfound confidence. "To engage with the complexities of history requires discomfort. It is where growth thrives. Yet by ignoring these narratives, we condemn our students to ignorance." The words reverberated, igniting a flicker of recognition in a few faces scattered throughout the audience. The hesitations in their eyes spoke of contemplation rather than outright opposition. She found herself searching for allies once more, her pulse quickening as she noticed the slight nods of approval from a handful of colleagues. They could very well be the lifeline she needed as she ventured deeper into these murky waters. Yet Carter's frown deepened, as if he intended to drown her words under his authority. "Your approach, Sarah, is entirely flawed," he said, bitterness lacing his tone. "Empathy is not a viable pedagogical tool. A focus on historical narratives disrupts the learning process. Our priority should be academic rigor and discipline." Each of his words struck her like blows, and she grappled with the urge to retreat into defensiveness. Academic rigor, she reminded herself, could not come at the expense of the rich tapestry of human experience. "Mr. Carter, education must evolve," she asserted, releasing the tension that coiled in her gut. "It must connect the past with the present, provoke thought, inspire engagement." Yet, with every fired shot in their volley, the realization washed over her: this was a battle more profound than simply teaching style. It was about the core of her beliefs. Anxiety crept in, whispering threats of isolation and failure, but layered atop it was a persistent flame of hope. She wasn't alone, she felt it. The murmurs were growing louder, shifting between curiosity and reaffirmation. "Imagine our students equipped not only with facts but with the capacity to empathize," she continued fervently, gesturing as her appeals grew animated. "Critical thinking thrives not in a vacuum of sterile facts, but through the storm of inquiry, respect, and recognition of the human experience." But who was she to challenge the status quo so boldly? The thought prickled her conscience, yet it only fueled her further. Sarah envisioned the faces of her students, eager, hungry for knowledge, yearning for connection. I refuse to deny them the tools to navigate the world, she declared, the weight of her responsibility suffusing her voice with urgency. To empower them is to honor the stories in which they are rooted. For a heartbeat, the atmosphere shifted again. Students, once passively watching, were now leaning forward, their curiosity igniting. But as she advanced, she could feel the undertow of skepticism still thickening the air. Will you neglect the integrity of our curriculum for personal agendas? Carter's question ricocheted in her mind, tearing against the fragile fabric of her confidence. At that moment, an unexpected understanding breached her psyche. To challenge the deliberately rigid structures was to fully embrace who she was as an educator. It was scary, daunting even, but the choice was ultimately hers to make. Breathe, she told herself. Take your stand. I am not here to confuse them, but to prepare them for the brave world beyond these walls, she said, her voice a mixture of strength and vulnerability. If we don't teach them to question, to challenge, how will they know the value of their own voices? Though her heart raced, she felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of secrecy. Perhaps this was the turning point. Perhaps this was where her journey as an educator transformed into something profound. Yet as she caught her breath, the murmurs only intensified, swirling around her like a storm poised to break. The opposition was not backing down, rather, it coalesced, seeking to undermine her in waves. Carter's gaze remained unsettlingly steady, a warning in his eyes that the clash was far from over. A challenging voice pierced through the din, you owe them the facts, not your interpretations. In that unyielding moment, Sarah understood that she stood not just for a revised teaching method but for a system capable of fostering an engaged future. The winds of change were swirling unpredictably now, she could either embrace them or find herself swept away. Will I rise, or will I be swept under? She mused internally, the storm raging on her horizon. The truth lingered tantalizingly close, whispering that the coming days would reveal both her ultimate challenge and the essence of her purpose. The auditorium buzzed with an electric intensity, but Sarah's world had narrowed to a singular focus, the fight for her vision of education. As Principal Carter squared his shoulders, tightening his grip on authority, she felt the weight of her colleagues' stares, each gaze a mixture of expectation and trepidation. Sarah inhaled deeply, channeling the energy swirling around her into clarity. True education exists at the intersection of knowledge and experience, she said, determined. It connects students not merely to the past but to their future. Facts are important, yes, but they are merely stepping stones to understanding. We cannot dismiss the narratives that give those facts meaning. A ripple of murmurs traveled through the audience, some nodding in agreement while others remained skeptical, their brows furrowed in thought. What did it mean to truly educate? She could feel the magnetic pull of her resolve as she leaned into her argument, each word becoming a sculptor's chisel shaping belief. Carter's eyebrow lifted in derision, the tension between them palpable. And how do you propose we engage with these narratives without compromising rigor, Sarah? Emotional engagement does not equate to educational value. His dismissal stung, igniting a tempest of anger within her. Was she willing to allow him to dictate the value of empathy and understanding? Why can't we engage them emotionally? Students are not robots. Teaching history without context is like trying to learn how to swim while standing on the shore. They need to dive into the water to understand its depths. In that premise, she found herself caught between two worlds, the cold rigidity of facts versus the vibrant pulse of human experience. The realization struck her the very essence of her career hung in this balance. Sarah glanced at the crowd. Some faces revealed comprehension, even excitement. Others appeared ready to pounce, waiting for her to falter. The stakes had risen. She felt the enormity of her position. This was more than just a classroom debate, it was an assertion of identity. Education is about building a bridge, she continued, each phrase growing in fervor. A bridge that spans generations, it carries stories, emotions, and lessons. Our students deserve a space where they can learn about the world that shaped them, and they need the skills to navigate it. For a moment, Sarah felt they were locked in a standoff, both sides assessed by spectators who valued their own stakes in the outcome. The pressure mounted with every passing second, and she sensed the urgency to drive her point home. Would you send them into the world unprepared to question their surroundings? To venture into conversations that challenge their perspectives? If we teach them only facts, we strip them of the very tools they'll need to interpret those facts meaningfully. The applause, hesitant at first, began to ripple across the auditorium. Yet, she could see Carter gathering his resistance, preparing for his next counterattack. Your passion is commendable, but passion alone cannot replace pedagogical integrity. Are you prepared to uphold that integrity, even if it means sacrificing your personal philosophy? The question sliced through her as she pondered the implications. Sacrificing integrity? To conform would be to betray everything she believed in. The confrontation with Carter was now layered, gripping her heart while forcing her mind to confront the fragility of her ideals. I would rather adapt my approach than abandon my principles, Sarah replied, a tremor of conviction lining her voice. The truth struck her with profound clarity. This was the moment she must define herself, not just as a teacher but as an agent of change. Her pulse quickened as she considered the echoes of her own struggles reflected in her students' faces. Hadn't they all been silenced at times? The children she was molding held the potential to become advocates for their own narratives, and she was their guide. A new wave of determination surged through her, dissolving the lingering uncertainty. The stakes felt impossibly high, yet with each heartbeat, a sense of liberation unfurled. She would assert her right to advocate for a more compassionate and engaged form of education even if it meant facing the storm squarely. As the murmurs began to crescendo, Sarah braced for Carter's response. She knew the stakes had shifted, she was fully exposed now, vulnerable yet empowered. The crowd was watching, and her resolve would set the future tone. Are you ready for the repercussions? She wondered, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she faced the unpredictable tide of support and opposition. It was becoming painfully clear that this was not just a debate, it was a reckoning. What price was she willing to pay in this quest for understanding? The moment before the answer coalesced would determine everything: her tenure, her students, her identity. As she caught her breath in the charged atmosphere, the question lingered heavy in the air. Would she emerge unscathed, or would the tide of adversity wash over her intentions? As the hall fell silent, Sarah's mind raced. She felt the weight of countless expectations resting heavily on her shoulders. Every moment was a test, not just of her professional stance, but of her very character. Uncertainty clashed with ambition. What had begun as a debate over educational philosophy had morphed into a deeply personal struggle, a struggle for her voice amidst a cacophony of opposition. Your proposal, while emotive, lacks a clear framework for implementation, Carter said, his tone engineered to reassert control over the conversation. How do you plan to measure success when you blend academic rigor with subjective narratives? She resisted the urge to rush her explanation. Instead, Sarah collected her thoughts, her breathing steadying as she imagined her students' faces. It was their futures she was fighting for, after all. Success can't always be quantified by standard testing metrics. We need to consider holistic assessments. Project-based learning and reflective practices can provide insight into students' understanding and growth. We can create opportunities for students to engage deeply with the material. The audience lingered on her every word, intrigue mixing with skepticism. Could such an approach be effective? As she spoke, she became acutely aware of the battle not only for her educational philosophy but for her professional identity. Would her colleagues recognize her determination, or would they interpret it as naive idealism? Carter's defense was relentless. But at what cost, Sarah? Are we willing to entertain methods that may compromise our commitment to excellence? Your ideas might entertain reform but risk reducing our standards. His challenge hung in mid-air, a gauntlet thrown, demanding a response that could either solidify her standing or unravel her ambition. Excellence is not synonymous with rigidity, Sarah countered, her voice steady despite the tempest brewing around her. True excellence encompasses adaptability. It allows for growth and change, it fosters creativity. If we focus solely on producing test takers instead of thinkers, what future are we crafting for them? The silence transformed, this time punctuated by thoughtful murmurs. She had struck a chord. Behind the murmurs of discontent, she detected threads of hope, others yearning for educational change. The thought ignited a flicker of confidence within her, even as apprehension threatened to steal it away. Sarah turned slightly to gauge the audience reactions, a wave of nods from younger teachers, further toward the back, while a group of older faculty retained their skepticism. She happened upon Mark, her close ally in the faculty, whose expression held fierce belief in her message. That small gesture fortified her resolve, reminding her of the collaborative spirit that ignited the first spark of her vision. As Carter readied his next rebuttal, Sarah felt the moment of urgency rise within her. This was more than a debate, it was the precipice of transformation. She allowed the atmosphere to settle, creating anticipatory silence before continuing. What if we challenge our students to engage in debates about the material? Let them explore history, literature, and the sciences through role-playing scenarios that ask them to express varied perspectives. In doing so, we equip them not only with knowledge but with crucial critical thinking skills and the ability to empathize, to connect with others who might hold different views. Isn't that the foundation of a successful future? The applause came stronger now, interspersed with hesitant claps but punctuated by Eva, a veteran teacher known for her reserved demeanor. Sarah's heart raced. Eva's support could shift the entire paradigm of the discussion. Carter's expression hardened, yet she sensed a crack emerging in his staunch demeanor, an acknowledgement that perhaps, hidden beneath her defiance, was reality he could not fully deny. We'll see if that sentiment holds true under scrutiny, Sarah. My concern is legitimate. Are you prepared for the backlash that may arise? In that moment, Sarah confronted the implications of Carter's question. A stab of fear coursed through her, fueled by concern for her future and her students' futures. She grappled with the ramifications not just for herself but for the entire educational philosophy she hoped to revolutionize. I am ready to face any backlash that comes, she declared, her voice taking on a reverberating strength. What I cannot accept is allowing fear to dictate our choices or to stifle the potential of our students. We owe it to them to explore these narratives. The crowd erupted, a mix of both applause and hesitance. Applause meant support, but hesitation laid bare the uncertainty gripping many. Carter's gaze remained steady, unwavering, yet Sarah could see the vulnerability hidden within it. With the stakes monumental, she felt something shifting inside herself, a new determination bubbling to the surface. She had risked everything, now standing even closer to defining not just her own identity but her legacy. As the debate continued, a new seriousness settled in her mind. What shadows of resistance would emerge next? How could she prepare for the inevitable, both from administration and colleagues committed to tradition over change? The battle was far from over, and she had only just begun to unravel the intricate layers of this ongoing confrontation. Tomorrow would bring its own tempest, and she was intrigued by what revelations lay in wait. What hidden truths would she uncover about her colleagues and herself in this arduous journey for educational justice? As Sarah exited the hall, the weight of the discussion lingered like a storm cloud overhead. Each step reverberated with mixed feelings: elation from the unexpected support, but also trepidation about the road that lay ahead. The battle she had initiated was only just beginning, and with each passing moment, she could feel the ground shift beneath her feet. She found herself in the staff lounge, the air thick with the scent of coffee mixed with the anxious energy that accompanied a contentious debate. Just as she poured herself a cup, Mark approached, the gleam in his eyes betraying his enthusiasm. You really held your ground today. I've never seen anyone challenge Carter like that, he exclaimed, his voice filled with a blend of admiration and disbelief. Thanks, Mark. But I'm not sure if it was enough, she admitted, her fingers tightening around the ceramic mug. It felt like a victory, but I can't shake the feeling that the real fight is still to come. Mark leaned against the counter, studying her closely. What will that fight look like? What's the next step? Sarah leaned back, taking a moment to reflect. The fervor she had expressed during the debate felt different now that the adrenaline was fading. I need to develop a clear, actionable plan that shows how my ideas can work in practice. I can't just rely on passion, I need data, examples, and a framework that demonstrates why this matters. The thought struck her with a surge of clarity. This wasn't merely about winning a debate, it was about sparking a movement, a paradigm shift in how education was conceived and delivered. I have to illustrate how project-based learning and reflective practices can succeed without undermining rigor. Mark nodded, but his brow furrowed. But with resistance from some faculty and administration, do you think they'll support it? She took a deep breath, recognizing the underlying question: would the risk of failure diminish her authority or empower her voice? They'll have to see the benefits firsthand. If I can present a pilot program, a model that shows effectiveness, I may sway even the skeptics. Determined, Sarah spent the next few weeks building that pilot program. She researched successful models from other institutions, examining case studies and evidence of positive outcomes derived from innovative teaching practices. In her mind, each data point was a building block, fortifying her vision of educational transformation, yet, the shadows of doubt still loomed. As she crafted the proposal, the questions morphed. What if she faced pushback not just from Carter but also from unexpected places within her own circle? She remembered the hesitance she had perceived in some colleagues during the debate, their fear mirrored in her own. After hours of writing and refining, she felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The proposal was a tapestry of innovation interwoven with practicality, illustrating how her approach nurtured not just academic performance but genuine growth in understanding and creativity. But the thought of presenting it made her stomach knot. On the day of the meeting with the administration, Sarah stood outside the conference room, each breath feeling heavier than the last. Her heart raced as she recalled the derision in Carter's voice and the hesitant applause from the staff. As she walked into the room, however, she took a moment to quiet her racing thoughts. This was not just a presentation, it was her chance to shape her legacy, to inspire a collective movement towards educational justice. What he didn't know about himself, she reminded herself, was that he wasn't merely facing opposition, he was igniting a passion within me that would not be quenched. Sarah stepped forward, armed with her research, her convictions, and the protective shield of unwavering belief in her vision. Little did she know that this meeting would test not only her resolve but the very foundation of what she knew about her colleagues and herself. The moment had come to face the real challenges lurking in the shadows. How would they react when confronted with the innovative ideas she was ready to unveil? Would they be open to change, or was her journey destined to create deeper divisions within the faculty? Sarah took a deep breath before entering the conference room, the air inside thick with anticipation. The long table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by the faces of her colleagues, some familiar, some daunting. As she settled herself in front of them, she could feel their eyes, those silent judgments, awaiting her every word. With the proposal meticulously printed before her, she realized that this moment hinged not just on facts and figures but on her ability to articulate a vision bigger than herself. "Thank you all for gathering today," she began, her voice steady despite the rapid pace of her heart. "I'm here to discuss an innovative approach to our curriculum that can transform not only how we teach but also how our students engage in their learning." As she spoke, weaving stories from her research with a precise, engaging narrative, she noticed a slight shift in the room. Some ignored her, lost in their notes, while others leaned in, curiosity flickering in their eyes. She highlighted successful projects from other institutions, illustrating how project-based learning not only improved academic performance but fostered critical thinking and collaboration skills. However, Sarah's enthusiasm clashed with the palpable resistance emanating from Carter, sitting steadfastly at the back of the room, arms crossed, a fortress of skepticism. His presence nagged at her, not merely as an antagonist but as the embodiment of the fears that loomed over her aspirations. What if they choose to question my authority? What if my colleagues rally behind him? The what-ifs clawed at her confidence, making her grip around the edges of the table tighten. As she explained her pilot program in detail, she tried to anticipate the challenges they might raise. Would it truly align with their existing standards? Would it risk academic integrity? When she invited questions, she sensed the tension dance in the air, thick and expectant. "Sarah," Carter interjected, his voice cutting through her momentum, "while I appreciate the enthusiasm behind your proposal, how do you plan to ensure this approach doesn't compromise student benchmarks?" His tone dripped with condescension, a calculated move designed to undermine her. Desperate to maintain her composure, she paused, inhaling deeply to steady herself. "That's a crucial point, Carter. I ensured that each aspect of the pilot addresses those benchmarks directly. The project-based framework is designed not to stray from our academic rigor but to enhance it, allowing for exploration and deeper learning that the traditional methods may not facilitate." For a moment, there was silence, the weight of her assertion hovering. Then, a colleague, Samantha, broke the tension, raising her hand. "If we were to implement this, how would you facilitate training for our staff to adapt to these changes?" It was a valid concern, but one she felt a flicker of relief at. "Great question. I envision workshops and peer mentoring, rather than top-down mandates. We create a collaborative environment where feedback is encouraged, and faculty have a voice in shaping their practice. In embracing change, we're also fostering community among ourselves." The dialogue progressed, but as she continued, Sarah could feel Carter's intensity probing her, looking for weakness. Gradually, burnished steel gave way to shifting sands, and the foundations of her confidence began to quaver beneath the onslaught. She had prepared for challenges, but not this intricate dance of intellectual sparring. Despite this, hints of encouragement appeared in the faces of some colleagues, reflecting a glimmer of hope that perhaps she could influence the course of their pedagogy. This revelation ignited a surge within her, propelling her forward as she delivered an impassioned recounting of the transformative potential of her ideas. Just as she felt momentum shift, Carter's voice rose again. "You're painting an idealistic picture, Sarah. What happens when this fails? How will you handle the backlash?" His challenge resonated deeply within her, stoking the embers of her doubt. Could the potential risks outweigh the rewards? Caught in his piercing gaze, she realized this wasn't merely about proving him wrong, it was about confronting her own fears of inadequacy. The choice was hers, to retreat into self-doubt or to boldly assert her vision. "I believe that growth stems from measured risk. At the heart of education lies the willingness to adapt and learn from failures. My approach allows room for adjustments based on real-time feedback." A charged silence filled the room, her words lingering in the air. As the meeting wound to a close, she could feel the shifting tides, but every fiber of her being remained on alert. The stakes had never felt higher. Would this mark the dawn of something revolutionary, or would she find herself sidelined and silenced? With unresolved tensions hanging like a sword above her, she prepared to face the fallout. Would her colleagues choose progress, or would fear compel them to retreat into the familiar? The meeting adjourned, but Sarah sensed that the real battle was just beginning. She needed to rally her allies, to forge connections and persuade the hesitant. Who could she count on, and would they support her vision against the tidal wave of apathy? As she stepped out, a cacophony of thoughts swirled within her. She'd given all she had in that room, but now the question loomed, would her resolve be enough to change the narrative, or was she merely setting herself up for heartbreak? She stepped into the hallway, still resonating with the heavy echoes of the conference room. The sharp fluorescent lights felt accusatory, highlighting the uncertainty etched across her face. Sarah's throat ached from the tension of the presentation, but her mind buzzed with a tumult of thoughts. She needed to strategize her next steps, but the myriad of emotions swirling inside her, doubt, determination, frustration, forced her to pause. As she leaned against the cool wall, Sarah recalled the faces of her colleagues. Samantha's interest lingered in her mind, her encouragement a flicker of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. If she could align with those who seemed receptive, perhaps she could build momentum. It was time to cultivate her allies, stitch a tapestry of support from the scattered threads of encouragement. With a newfound resolve, she pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts to identify potential allies. Her heart thudded against her chest as she contemplated reaching out to Samantha first. In their previous collaborations, Sarah had always admired Samantha's analytical prowess and willingness to embrace innovation. It was worth a shot. How about we grab a coffee later, she texted, heart racing. Would she open the door to deeper discussions, or would their exchange fizzle under the weight of skepticism? A moment later, her phone buzzed. Sounds great. I'd love to hear more about your ideas. Relief washed over her, paired with an adrenaline rush. Meeting face to face would allow for a candid dialogue, where she could better convey her vision. As the minutes ticked by, she felt her uncertainty slowly morph into ambition. She would need to frame her ideas strategically to resonate with her hesitant peers. The risk of rejection still loomed, but she couldn't allow that fear to hinder her progression. After a few minutes, her phone buzzed again. Carter had sent a group email to the entire faculty outlining his concerns about her proposal. The message was a stark reminder of the uphill battle ahead. He dissected her ideas with surgical precision, arguing that they strayed too far from established norms. It felt personal, an assault on her credibility. A wave of frustration surged within her but was stifled by a flicker of defiance. She wouldn't let his critique define her. He had positioned himself as the gatekeeper of traditional methodologies, and that perception was further igniting her determination. Sarah needed to disarm his skepticism, not with isolated rebuttals but by crafting a compelling narrative that aligned not only with innovation but also with the values her colleagues held dear. Later that afternoon, when she met Samantha at a bustling cafe, the energy surged between them as they exchanged ideas. Sarah explained her vision for the curriculum changes, articulating how they could align with institutional goals while enhancing student engagement. Samantha nodded enthusiastically, her input reigniting Sarah's enthusiasm. The discussion meandered through different angles, probing both potential pitfalls and triumphs. Samantha's insights challenged Sarah to rethink her strategies. We need to make them see that this is a natural evolution of what we already do. It's not a rejection of tradition, it's an enhancement of it. The layers of complexity within the proposal demanded more than mere enthusiasm, they needed practical implementation strategies that could be easily grasped. After hours of coffee-fueled brainstorming, Sarah felt a semblance of clarity rising. She could visualize a plan, a narrative arc that began with tradition but weaved in innovation, a balance of comfort and adventure. As they parted ways, Samantha promised to take her thoughts to the next faculty meeting, pledging to advocate for Sarah's vision. The thought of Carter's impending scrutiny loomed, cast a shadow across her newly kindled hope. The upcoming faculty meeting would pose a critical test not only for her proposal but for her burgeoning identity as a leader willing to disrupt the status quo. Could she sustain this momentum against the tide of opposition? As she walked back to her office, a familiar doubt crept in. Would she have enough allies to counteract Carter's influence, or would he rally the others to dismiss her ideas outright? Determination surged within her once more, mixed with an unnerving anxiety. Sarah knew she was standing on the precipice of something significant, but the leap would require all her courage. Tomorrow's meeting would not only be a platform for her proposal but a stage for her evolution. The thought ignited both fear and excitement as she prepared herself for the confrontation ahead. What strategies could she employ to ensure that her vision wouldn't just survive, but thrive amidst criticism? But one question lingered as she settled in for the night: at what cost would she emerge victorious? Days passed as Sarah devoted herself to refining her proposal and building a coalition of support among her colleagues. The day of the faculty meeting arrived, a powerful culmination of her journey toward redefining the educational landscape at Harmony Pines. As she walked into the room, her pulse quickened, fortified by the collective energy generated by the allies she had gained. When she glanced around the table, Sarah noticed familiar faces of those who had once leaned back with skepticism now leaning in with curiosity. Samantha sat beside her, an aura of solidarity emanating from the familiarity and trust they had built over the past few weeks. This time, Sarah felt prepared. She was ready to engage with her peers not just as an advocate for change but as a leader in educational reform. "Thank you for gathering today," she started, her voice steady, more commanding than ever before. "Today, I'm here to discuss our opportunity to enhance our curriculum to not only achieve academic rigor but to revolutionize how we engage our students in meaningful learning experiences." As she presented the revised pilot program, she noticed how her colleagues leaned forward, actively engaging with her words. She highlighted not just the importance of project-based methods but backed them with statistics and case studies that illustrated the tangible successes seen in comparable systems. We have the chance to empower our students with meaningful narratives that contextualize their learning, she articulated, nodding toward Samantha and the collective energy sparking in the room. When she invited her peers to share concerns, she was met with constructive dialogue, questions that felt more like collaborative inquiries rather than challenges. What if we allowed students to choose their projects based on their interests within the curriculum? One teacher proposed, illustrating the idea of ownership as vital to learning. Yes, Sarah exclaimed, that's precisely the type of engagement that fosters deeper connections to the material. The more our students can relate to the content, the more they invest in their learning. It also cultivates critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Yet, as the dialogue surged with enthusiasm, Carter remained a looming presence, posture rigid and eyes narrowed. When it seemed the dialogue leaned in Sarah's favor, he interjected, skeptical as ever. While I appreciate the enthusiasm, Sarah, what you're proposing could lead to educational malpractice. How can we be sure the students will meet benchmarks if we allow them complete freedom in their learning? A shiver of doubt passed through her, but instead of faltering, she welcomed the challenge. Mr. Carter, she responded with conviction, what we risk with a checklist-oriented approach is homogenizing our students' educational experiences. Our goal is to prepare them for a dynamic world. What we truly need is a model of education that emphasizes agency while providing a structured framework for academic success. To her surprise, supportive murmurs echoed around the table before she continued, feeling the tide of the room shifting. She leaned into that momentum, offering further insights about integrating assessments that reflect critical thinking over rote learning, inviting all to envision a classroom where students could wrestle with ideas and feel the space to express their voices. Incorporating reflective practices, peer feedback, and creative projects does not mean we compromise academic integrity, it enhances it, she urged, noting the shifting expressions around her. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that her peers were genuinely considering her vision. Even Carter's stance seemed momentarily softened as visible contemplation crossed his face. The conversation sparked new ideas, intertwining Sarah's innovative framework seamlessly with the cherished traditions of their school. Finally, as she concluded her presentation, it felt like a culmination of personal evolution. She wasn't just defending her proposal, she was embodying everything those Ottoman women had fought for, demonstrating courage in the face of resistance, finding her voice resonating out full volume rather than held back in fear. I stand ready to collaborate with anyone interested in piloting this plan for our students. Together, we can make a real impact, not only adhering to standards but redefining what those standards can look like if we choose to invest in the potential of our learners, she declared, a fusion of conviction and hope coursing through her. The room erupted into applause, and this time it echoed without hesitation, recognizing the need for change. As she smiled, a wave of deep satisfaction washed over her. She was proud not only for herself but for everyone. Those lessons weren't just academic, they were human, relatable, and full of potential. To her astonishment, even Carter joined in cautiously applauding, perhaps finally recognizing the merit behind her perspective. As she stepped out into the hallway, multiple colleagues expressed excitement about embarking on the journey she had ignited, facing the future with renewed purpose. Sarah felt a buoyant sense of accomplishment sweeping through her. She had not only advocated for change but also embraced leadership, transforming doubt into collaborative energy. She had proven her ability to unify and inspire, realizing her role as a pivotal figure in educational reform within her community. In that moment, she understood the profound human connection in education. Her transformation had reshaped her not just as a teacher, but as a force for good, resolved to stand firmly for her beliefs and the narratives that define them. Now was the moment for others to join her in this journey. So if you are inspired by Sarah's story, you need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next riveting emotional narratives that can spark change in your life too. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover their potential. Comment below with your thoughts on this powerful conclusion or share your theories about what happens next. And remember to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative journey. Don't wait even one more second to empower others.